Okay, welcome back, John Boyle.
Thank you, Jim.
I could call you Prophet Boyle. Our topic for today, I want to talk about, there's a lot of rhetoric about, a lot of footwork going on in Washington and state legislatures. So today's topic, hidden taxes, fines, fees, forfeitures, unfunded liabilities, and paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like you to address that huge issue.
Well, the taxes that are most visible in America, of course, are income taxes and Social Security taxes and Medicare taxes. But underneath, and if you go to the state and local level, then you have property taxes and you have sales taxes. Now those are visible. Those are out there for everybody to see. And for the most part, they are voted on, either by Congress or by the state legislatures. Now, what happens when government wants more money and they can't get it approved? Well, maybe they use a little sleight of hand. Let's just take Social Security and Medicare. What has happened over the last 40 years with Social Security and Medicare? Well, Social Security has accumulated an unfunded liability of $8 trillion. Medicare has accumulated an unfunded liability of $38 trillion. We have $14 trillion on the books, and you have $6.5 trillion of unfunded liabilities for the federal employees. That adds up to $64.5 trillion of liabilities out there courtesy of the federal government. Now, let's talk a little bit about what an unfunded liability is. An unfunded liability is a liability that you're on the hook for that you have no money to provide for. And let me give you an example. Let's say I work for XYZ Corporation and I retire. And the value of my retirement benefits are $400,000. And let's say that, now that's present valuing it. That's taking the future value of my benefits for my life expectancy. I may die earlier, I may die later. But we actuarially, we look at what's your life expectancy. We take a present value for that number of years. That's a simplified way of explaining it. And we say, okay, it's $400,000. Now let's say that XYZ Corporation put aside $100,000. Well, I'm not going to work anymore. So over my retirement, they have to come up with $300,000 to pay for my retirement. That's an unfunded liability. Now, that has to be paid by earnings in the future, not by earnings that were made while I worked. Now, if you get 2 or 3 rounds of retirees out there, you've got a problem because you have this big unfunded liability that you're now having to pay for, and you have to pay it out of current earnings. So that's what an unfunded liability is. So what has happened in America is, instead of funding Social Security and Medicare and telling the people that we have to raise taxes to a level that will adequately fund them, and Social Security and Medicare have gone up mightily, but they haven't gone up enough, and they've spent the money. Keep in mind, they spent the money to pay for the retirements of Americans over age 66. So what we have here is an unfunded liability for the federal government of $64.5 trillion. That unfunded liability would almost, if it were amortized, double the cost of the federal government. Take it up from $3.6 trillion a year to $7 trillion a year, which would destroy the American economy. So therein lies the problem. These liabilities are out there. There are no assets set aside specifically to offset these liabilities, or no assets of any size. So we have to bring those liabilities down. And keep in mind that when Social Security started, life expectancy was roughly 60, and retirement was 65 under Social Security. Now life expectancy is 78, and retirement is 66. So what was affordable in 1936 is no longer affordable. Plus, we've added Medicare. That was added in 1966 under the Johnson regime, or the Johnson presidency. I'm sorry, did I say regime?
Well, we could also say administration.
Well, we could.
We could be kind, you know.
So we have a problem here. But the problem does not stop at the federal government. Let's go over a couple of other hidden taxes. Here's a hidden tax. Your employer pays 7.65% into Social Security just like you do, and pays roughly 1.8% into Medicare just like you do. So there's 9% that they pay of your pay to the federal government, which doesn't show up on your paycheck. You don't even think about that. But that's roughly 9% of your pay going to the federal government, which really doesn't show up anywhere on your books of account. But it's being paid nonetheless. That's a problem.
In other words, you earned it.
You earned it.
You earned it.
But you're not seeing it.
Ever.
So when you look at your total taxes, take the 9% that's going to the federal government from your employer, which he'd be happy to pay you, and add that to your tax bill. And when you add that to your tax bill and you add up all the other taxes that we're going to talk about, you might be surprised that the average middle class income earner is paying more than 50% of his income to the tax man.
What?
And that, yes,
What?
Yes, that does not include,
I thought it was 46.
well, the average is probably closer to 50 when we add it all up.
Oops.
So, but that does not include paying the unfunded liabilities. If those have to be paid under the current Social Security and Medicare scheme of things, we have a whole nother round of problems.
So, wait a minute. So in an 8-hour day, I'm working 4 hours for the government.
Roughly, yeah. I mean, they talk about tax day being roughly sometime in May already. So they talk about that. But I think when you get all of the taxes and all of the hidden taxes in there, I think you're getting pretty closer to mid-year, at best.
Cowabunga.
But let's talk about local governments. Now there, you don't have the ability to run the printing press, so you have a problem right away. If they want extra money, they have to generate real dyed-in-the-wool cash, or they can do what the federal government did and move their liabilities out with unfunded liabilities by not funding the benefits that their employees are entitled to. So what's the biggest hidden tax in local government? It is the thing that is driving local governments to distraction now, and the thing that is the biggest challenge to local governments. And that is, again, unfunded liabilities. It is unfunded liabilities. While there are many local units of government that allow their employees to retire after 20 years of service with full benefits, or after 25 years of service with full benefits, or after age 50 and 20 years with full benefits, none of these schemes are affordable. If the benefits were funded currently and the taxes raised to provide for that funding, you would have a rebellion. So that is part of the consternation. That is the problem going on with the local units of government all across America, states and many local units of government. It's called defined benefit pension plans that are not funded. It's where you get a benefit and the funds need to be there to pay for that benefit. Now, when you have local employees who are eligible for retiree at 20 and out, someone starting right out of high school can retire at 38. And in fact, we have municipalities and local units of government in Michigan where they do retire at 38 and in their early 40s. And people say, well, police and fire need to retire in their early 40s. I don't believe that, but if that's the case, then they need to fund those benefits over their lifetime and make sure that they're funded and that the can isn't being kicked down the road.
So wait a minute. Let me ask you something. If I tried to manage my finances this way, what would happen to me?
Well, you'd have to lead a very frugal life so that you could fund your retirement over 20 or 25 years.
No, let me just say that, let's say that I promised to pay you $300 and I pay you $100.
300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 300. 3
and I use some language to try and convince you that actually the 100 was worth 3, I think I'd go to jail.
Well, you wouldn't have a debtor's prison, but what you have here is a scheme where they say you are entitled to these benefits, and then they don't fund them, and then they say, well, okay, now the state or the federal government has to bail us out, or the taxpayers have to bail us out. And it's not an option now because we made these promises. And it's hard to blame the municipal employees when they sit at a table and they negotiate benefits that are unaffordable, and then down the road the management for the municipality says we can't afford those. Well, they weren't the folks that agreed to the benefits.
Right.
But nonetheless, when a policeman or a fireman retires at 42 with $65,000 or $70,000 a year in benefits, that's a $3 million retirement with health care. And what you get to is, if that's not funded, then eventually you have what you have today in many municipalities in Michigan and other states. You have 3 police departments, 3 fire departments, and 3 administrations. 2 that are retired and 1 that's working. And that unfunded liability that's showing up today, which now has to be paid, because what happens is eventually the liability builds and builds and builds, and then finally it has to be paid. And you're paying as you go. Well, when you're paying as you go in the early stages, there aren't a lot of retirees out there. But eventually the retirees build, and you reach a steady state where you have retirees enter and retiring dying in about the same amount. But at that point, you have a very large annual expense for those benefits. And that's a problem. But that's just one form of hidden taxes for local units of government. You have fines. Fines which are not regulated by a vote of the people. Traffic tickets, speed trap. When the ticket revenue goes up, that's a hidden tax. And people say, well, they're breaking the laws. Well, that's correct, for the most part. But what the laws are can be the problem. If the speed limits are artificially set low, then they are breaking the laws, but it is the abuse of the driver and the taxpayer. Revenue raising scheme in Michigan is called Driver Responsibility Act. This is an act where if you get a ticket and you get a certain number of points, you get above 4 points under the Driver Responsibility Act, different from insurance points, the Secretary of State sends you another fine because you haven't been fined enough. The fact that you paid the ticket, the fact that your insurance went up, no. Now you have a whole nother fine. This is nothing but revenue raising. This is nothing but revenue raising, and it was not approved by the legislature. What you have here is they send you a bill saying you have to pay this, and you have to pay a certain amount each year for 2 years. If you don't pay it, then they pull your driver's license, and this may have changed, but they historically have not told you, and if you get pulled over again, you get arrested for not having a driver's license, your car gets towed, and now you've got a couple $1,000 expense to get your car out and deal with driving without a license, and now you've got another ticket, and you've got another round of Driver Responsibility Act problems. This is a hidden tax, and it's a very big tax for people that get caught in this web. The assigned risk pool in Michigan is a pool of drivers where you get a certain number of insurance points, and now you have to go into the assigned risk pool. And the assigned risk pool simply raises your rates astronomically, and it was motivated by the insurance companies. Well, there's no need for an assigned risk pool. If you're insurable, someone will insure just about anybody in the free market. But what the assigned risk pool does is takes people based upon a very low threshold and throws them into the assigned risk pool, raises their rates according to statute, so you can't argue with it, and there's nobody to compete with it, because once you're in the assigned risk pool, you can't go anywhere else in Michigan. And most of the insurance companies' profits for insurance for drivers is from the assigned risk pool. So this is the insurance companies getting together with the legislature and making money for the insurance companies. Again, It's a hidden tax. It's imposed upon you by the government, and it's for the benefit of the insurance companies. Late payments for taxes, fines, permits, renewals, licenses. Let's take inspections. Let me give you an example. But the most egregious thing was the arrangement between the township and the consultants. It went like this. We have site plan consultants that will oversee your project. Now, since the project's owners have a history of not paying these guys because they didn't believe their bills, they send their bills to the township. The township pays them, but they've run amok. Let's go to fees. Well, you can see the fees going up. Just look at your license plates. Look at hunting fees, fishing fees, fees for business permits. All of those are going up vastly faster than the rate of inflation. It is not improved by the legislature. It is a hidden tax. That's all it is. It's a hidden tax. And these hidden taxes, just for a moment, we'll talk about the paperwork. The paperwork that goes into filing just federal taxes for basically 200 million tax returns in the United States is many billions of hours. The tax code is there to accommodate lobbyists and vested interests. It is not there to accommodate the average taxpayer. That is another hidden tax, because even for simple tax returns now, people have to go and hire help. That's a hidden tax. So you have fines, you have fees, you have forfeitures, you have unfunded liabilities, and you have paperwork, and these are huge burdens on America, and they are primarily motivated by the government's need for more money. Not painting all governments with a broad brush. There are some that are mightily well managed, and we've got some of them here in Michigan. But many governments have abused their power to raise fines and fees, increase the opportunities for forfeitures, and have accumulated unfunded liabilities which cannot be paid. It needs to change, and it will change if you, the voters, get involved and tell your city councils and your local government and your federal legislatures that you don't like hidden taxes. You want everything visible. That's when it will change for sure. And making changes that to systems that have developed over 40 years.
So we can turn something around. To wrap it up, we can turn an opening statement around. Freedom is gained gradually by an interested, informed, and involved people. We'll see you next time. Hey everybody, this is a postscript to the discussion that just took place with John Boyle. I want to point out to you that John has been talking about what is going on for 25 years. People have not been listening. And so one of the things that we're going to hope to do is to get John back to talk about the high price of government. You know, we want to talk about how much actually do we pay for ex-presidents. How much does the Congress and Senate cost us? I mean, if we're going to talk about doing some cutting and some economizing, why don't we just start at the top? So there was an American humorist and performer, Will Rogers, some time ago. And if you don't know who Will Rogers is, and you're a high school graduate, you got gypped. If you're a college graduate, you really got gypped. Anyway, Will Rogers was quoted as saying that we have the best politicians that money can buy. I realize that that's a double entendre, but we're getting gypped. Now there's something of an urban legend that it is proposed, and it actually has been proposed by Representative Chakafata of Pennsylvania, House Bill 4646, that there would be a 1% tax on all financial transactions at all financial institutions. Now, this suggestion really hasn't gone anywhere, so I don't want to start a huge rumor here and get you all panicky, but the point is, John was just talking about unfunded liabilities, hidden taxes, hidden fees, and it's really time to understand what these things are all about. So keeping in mind John is an actuary, we want to really start looking at why he believes that we can't afford American government the way it is.